And we are recording with Mr. Charles Smith and I guess diametrically opposed weather. You're in Hawaii. I'm in Portland, Maine, and it's snowing right now. So I don't think we could be farther apart geographically, or I guess climatically. Is that the correct word? But yeah. For all future listeners, today is Friday, January 6th, 2023 at 4:07 p.m. Eastern time. And we'll continue our conversation that we were just having in a second. But real quick, for my audience, please introduce yourself, Mr. Smith.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be on your podcast, Tommy. And I am a financial sociology, political kind of writer with my own blog, which I started about 18 years ago, called of2minds.com, anticipating zero audience and success, which was a correct projection for the first 6 months. But I started writing about housing in early late 2005 and 2006 when the bubble was rising. And because I used to be a carpenter, I worked my way through college as a carpenter and became a builder. Then I knew something about housing and urban design and some other stuff that I'd been writing about before. So anyways, I attracted an audience because I was like saying, hey, you see this bubble? That's a bubble. Bubbles don't end well. And so that was not too hard a call, but and from then I expanded into a bunch of different finance, social movement, the transformation of our economy and society that we all know we need. That's basically my topic.
And again, I guess the opposite of that is what you were saying beforehand, that I cover a wide variety of topics. And that's not, some people compliment me on that. It is not to be complimented. It is because I have to be interested in what I'm talking about. If I focus on one topic, I will beat it into the ground and then I will grow to hate it. And there is a less of a scientific variable, more of a new agey variable, but there is like a life force that drives the podcast. And I can't fake it. I can't fake interest. I can try. I can give it the old college try, but I can't fake it. And if I'm doing the 28th straight episode on World War II, I'm going to be sitting there trying not to fall asleep, and the guest is going to pick up on it, and the listener is going to pick up on it. The animation is not there. And I think that is what gives the podcast its flavor and its life. So I have to jump from thing to thing until you can't listen to your favorite song every single day, or it's no longer your favorite song. So I have to sort of navigate whatever I am drawn to at that moment. And then there are deviations too. Is there a breaking news? Something is something that, I feel like people want to talk about. But for the most part, I just have to sort of feel the magnetic pull of whatever it is I'm interested in. And that is what leads to the wide variety of topics you were asking about beforehand.
Yeah, well, I think that's great, and we're both we're all blessed to be alive in a juncture in history with lots of different dynamics in play. So there's a near infinite variety of very interesting and consequential subjects. I just want to point out, when I'm looking down, I'm making notes. I'm like old school, like every once in a while. And so I'm not looking at my phone to check my, crypto portfolio or whatever. I'm making notes because I forget key phrases,
I would do like the first, I think, 100 episodes or so. I had a notebook. Yeah. And I would make notes, and I would literally say exactly what you're saying. Hey, if I'm looking down, I'm making a note. I'm not playing on because you can always tell when a guest is like, the phone, but they're off. They think they're being sneaky, and they're like, yeah. And I'm like, dude, just, if you're finished with the podcast, like, let's be finished. Let's not do this. Give me I would rather have someone's undivided attention for 20 minutes and then just end it, rather than they're looking down. They're like, oh yeah, cool. Tell me more. I'm like, dude, just smack me in the face. Just spit on me. Because that's more courteous than what you're doing right now. Because now you're insulting my intelligence as well. No, you're fine, dude. Take notes. But I do think it's kind of fascinating is the fourth turning, which is a phrase I had not heard before today, admittedly. And how we do sort of see these developments over cycles of, I guess, generations. And I guess there's a less formal, I've had a less formal understanding of it. And it's the whole just, the first generation immigrant comes over here with nothing in their pocket. Either they claw to the top or they put their children in a position to claw to the top. The child claws to the top, becomes the CEO, whatever, the Vanderbilt, the Carnegie. The next generation does okay. They follow along in the footsteps. And then the third, the generation after that is the trust fund kid. And then the generation after that is, they wrap the Bentley around a telephone pole. And then their kids grow up degenerates. But they're not all happening at the same time. These things are offsets, which is, I think, is probably one of the only, not one of the only, but a huge part of, I guess, why America has been relatively successful is we are always bringing in new people who are claw to the top, because we know in 50 years the people at the top now are going to be deadbeats. Could you maybe give me a more professional take on the fourth turning?
Sure. But let me just preface that by commenting on the cycle, the generational cycle you mentioned, which is we all see it. And what's interesting is there are some of the oldest, wealthiest families that are actively engaged in actually producing things, as opposed to just financiers, rentier class skimming off the labor of other people who built big successful businesses. They are, if you look at how they take care of their children, they often don't live extravagantly. The kids are expected to start at the bottom in the family business. And so there's this sort of discipline of to limit that kind of degeneracy you speak of, because if we don't have any adversity, you can't possibly grow. And that's the irony of trying to protect ourselves from everything, is if there's no pressure, no adversity, and no limits. In other words, like you do your best work, I think, when you're pressed for time, you don't have hardly any money, and it's like make or break. You've got to do faster, better, cheaper, or else it's over. And a lot of my personal heroes, exemplify that idea. They just were at the bottom, just failed, rejected, et cetera, et cetera. And then it was like that pressure forced them to move on. And so once everything's so comfortable and there's no pressure on you, then of course you end up either degenerating or failing, because there's no selective pressure, if we want to speak in the language of natural selection or systems. Okay, so The Fourth Turning is the title of a book, and it was published in, I think, the mid 90s. And the two authors proposed a rather, in my mind, complex generational pattern, which they identified as 4 generations that would then repeat. And the generations had characteristics that would repeat through history, similar to what the system that you described. And so they mapped this 4 generational cycle onto American history, as each generation being around 20 years. So that's an 80-year cycle. And it's very interesting because you can go from like 1781, which is the end of the Revolutionary War. Then you go 80 years. 1861, start of the Civil War. Another 80 years, 1941, World War II starts.
Oh, God.
And then 80 years is 2021.
Oh, no.
And so I think it's a fascinating sociological study, that book and the idea. My personal preference is cycles that arise from other forces that are easier to actually identify and track, in the real world. And lots of other, writers have done great work on this. Like Peter Turchin is a historian who's writing currently, and he sees cycles of order and disorder. And just to kind of summarize, he's written a number of books, and he has two kind of claims. One is, he says, I am basing my cycle research on actual historical and archaeological evidence, meaning like you discover a hoard of gold or silver coins that's been buried, and then you can date them. And then if those periods, no, people don't bury their coins in good times. They only bury it in times of disorder. So you dig up all these caches of old coins, and you can identify the periods of disorder where people were going, hey, you know, the armies are raging through my area, blah, blah, blah. I better just bury my wealth. And so that's an example of the kind of evidence that he accumulates, right? And so he feels this is not just some kind of theory, that he feels that he has backed it up with historical and archaeological evidence of cycles of order and disorder, which he tends to see in roughly 50 years. So and so he made a splash in the, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago by saying, hey, the next cycle is going to turn in 2020. And everyone was like kind of dissing him, like, oh, come on, you know, the cycles are just figments of imagination, blah, blah, blah. And so then all this stuff starts happening in 2020, and not just COVID, but other stuff. And so his whole sort of idea boils down to humans have, when in good times, there are reasons to cooperate, you know, like, and so when we have more reasons to cooperate than reasons to, you know, disagree and not cooperate, then you get a social order that's productive. And then we run out of reasons to cooperate and we find reasons to not cooperate, and then everything dissolves, everything, you know, decays, because if you don't have any cooperation, then you just have a bunch of warring interests, then the social order just falls apart. And so, and I think, so that's one theory of cycles that's interesting. Another one is by this historian, David Hackett Fisher, who wrote a book called The Great Wave. And what he was doing was similar. He was looking at data like how many people are getting married, how many kids are born out of wedlock, what is the inflation rate in, as best as we can tell, in, you know, 1380.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. And he found that there's cycles of abundance and scarcity, which is totally part of nature, right? We all know what happens when, you know, the rats discover a new dump of fantastic food, then you have a proliferation of rats, and then they eat up the stash of great food, and then they start weakening and getting sick and dying and all that. So he proposes the same thing for humans. And this, of course, makes sense because the human population expands when there's lots of cheap energy, lots of cheap food, the weather's good, and all this kind of stuff. And then when weather turns bad, like the mini ice age in Europe, or in the Roman era, you know, the weather started cooling off, reducing crop yields, and then the Roman Empire starts decaying and coming apart at the seams, right? So there's that. And then there's also like Ophuls and other writers who talk about how the way that society gets entrenched. In other words, the entrenched interests and elites basically eliminate any competitor, social class or economic class, and then they sort of rig the system to, you know, benefit themselves. And of course, that that withdraws the vibrancy and vitality and competing interests that keep a society and economy going. So there's, I think if you put those together, I think those are pretty powerful arguments that humans are in fact part of nature. And therefore we do respond to cycles of scarcity and abundance and inequality. And as well as the maybe vaguer or more difficult to pin down generational cycles that the book Fourth Turning discusses. Sorry for that long-winded explanation.
No. That is part and parcel for this podcast. Have you ever heard of cymatics?
No.
It's I'm probably butchering it, but it's I think it's how sound interacts with matter, and it's a great video. I think it's called cymatics. But it's these guys will take like a I don't know, like a speaker or something, and they'll put like a plate on, like a metal square on top of it, and then they'll put, white sand or something to contrast from the black metal, and then you'll play different frequencies and then make all these brilliant shapes. Like and it's like, I mean, like super intricate. I mean, almost psychedelic, like a weird sort of pulsating cornea, or maybe almost checkers, and it's not every sound. Like there's almost like static in between shapes, but they do create like a resonance, and it's fascinating. But what you start to see is like it's not the sand that's doing it. It's the sound, and the sand is how we see it. If it wasn't sand, it could be marbles, or it could be maple syrup, or whatever. But it's a medium for us to visualize this underlying current. Now, where does the underlying current come from? I have no idea. Well, obviously, it comes from the sound. Why does the sound do that with matter? I have no idea. But it kind of seems like, and this is not to shirk personal responsibility, and of course there are things, your dad grows up a billionaire and you never have to do anything, you're going to be a shithead. But there does seem to be something like this underlying current. When we see these cycles happen in like the Roman Empire or the British Empire or the current American Empire, and it happens on different continents of different races of people over different millennia, it starts to feel like there's some deeper theme here. It's not the providence of, oh, those Romans or those French, they're known for their cycles. No, it goes from pyramids to the Empire State Building. And again, there is personal responsibility. But when you zoom out far enough, it does start to look like a theme. Now, where does the theme come from? I don't know. That seems to be some sort of deeper manifestation from the coding of reality. But it does more and more look like they're just these themes that we're watching. Like they're just patterns that we are inhabiting. I think Alan Watts used to say like about a whirlpool. If you like go to a river or a stream and you see a little whirlpool, you're not looking at the same whirlpool. Every second, it's different water. A leaf can come by, or some grass, muddy water, clear water, snow, ice, but it's still the same pattern. But everything's flowing through it. So is it the water that's making the whirlpool, or is there an inherent whirlpool and it's being visualized through water? If it's not water, it could be, a tornado. You see it as clouds, or so I don't know what it is. And I don't really know if there's any purpose to defining it. But it does seem like there are these underlying patterns. We visualize them through humans and, clawing your way to the top of the Ivy Leagues and becoming a billionaire. And then you go from the process of innovation and setting up a uniform oil system or a railroad system to then you move to the next layer of like lobbying Congress and shutting down your competitors. And then it finally turns into a vicious like corporate raider takeover. And then there's always like a Shakespearean fall and the next thing rises. But like, are we just visualizing these patterns? But like much like you can have an extremely low frequency or an ultra high frequency, there are patterns like my daily pattern. I get up, I go to the gym, take a shower, I do a podcast, I go to bed. But then there's also like century long patterns. And it's the fourth turning, or 80-year patterns. Again, I don't really know if there's much of a value to defining it and pointing it out. Much like you could point out, like, hey, stars explode every 4 billion years. Good to know. Like, still got to pay my taxes. Like, I still got shit to do after this. But it does appear to be that there are patterns almost independent of humans. And I don't really know where to go from that, or if there is a point in me making that. But nonetheless, that's my observation.
Well, I think your use of the word resonance is very interesting, and I can see that you come from a science informed perspective, because you're using terminology that I can relate to, because I think like if you ask me, like, what are you bringing to the table, you know, in the world uh, of blogs and writing and podcasts or whatever. And it's all like, okay, what I think what I'm trying to bring to the table is natural selection is and systems function like at scale and variance, right? I mean, they work at small scale and medium and large. These the same dynamics function at every scale. And so I think there's a lot to learn about that. And as you say, we're embedded in these cycles of history that are so long that you know, our entire lifespan is you know, we're as history speeds up because of technology, we're able to actually experience a few eras in each of our lifetimes if we have a normal lifetime. Whereas, you know, somebody in 1380 or, you know, 1492, other than, you know, some big discoveries that played out, it was like life just went on for, you know, decades or even hundreds of years with very little change. And so we're sort of blessed with a more exciting time. But I think your point about resonance is interesting, because there's another cycle that's well known called the Kondratiev cycle. That's credit. You know, credit expands. Everybody's starting to spend more money, you know, start new businesses, you know, everything's great. Then credit starts contracting, like, you know, a malinvestment. People borrowed and spent too much money. And then the economy goes into recession or depression because credit is shrinking. And so I think what we might explore is the idea that your idea of resonance of these different frequencies, if you will, or cycles, when they pile up together, then you know, you get a greater amplification, and then therefore you can have stability, you know, destabilizes and becomes nonlinear, because, you know, this is additional, you know, it's you're adding sources of instability. And so you could say, well, if only one cycle's operating, it's no big deal because the system has feedback and buffers, and, you know, every system has ways to adapt to stress or, you know, instability, right, to recover equilibrium. But when you get a bunch of these piling up at the same time, the system is overwhelmed. You know, the buffer's thin, the feedback, you know, starts maybe feeding back in the wrong direction, like amplifying the problem. And so then the system breaks down. And once you've lost coherence, if you will, then it's very hard to reestablish that. And so that's in a kind of systems language. That's why we see nations and empires collapse. Is they had coherence and stability. And then when they had that, you know, buffers and feedback and vitality, they could repel invaders. They could deal with a drought or, you know, a pandemic. And then later on, after their buffers have thinned and there's more and more waves of instability hitting the empire at the same time, then it crumbles. And then once that stability is lost, it's very difficult to recover. And so that's why we see in nature, you know, you can look at populations of, you know, various, you know, animals, and then they rise and fall depending on a bunch of different factors around them, right? The predators and prey and weather extremes and all this kind of stuff. And so it's like, okay, so where does that get us? Like you said, from the 4 billion year cycle? Well, I think the interesting thing to me is if you add those cycles up, if you see this, if you see these cycles as real, which I think there's evidence for that, then you go, hey, wow, all these are piling up on us right now. Like we may be at an inflection point where linear turns nonlinear and stability becomes, you know, reverts in a phase change to instability. And then all the wonderful things that we take for granted might actually decay, become sporadic, or go away. And so that possibility, again, we can look at it like math-wise and say, well, what are the odds of this? What are the probabilities of something unraveling on a systemic level that would really, you know, mess up everybody's lives in some way? And you go, well, whatever you assign it, there's, even if it's a small probability, the outcome is so drastic that you've got to consider that. You know, it's kind of like if you had your nest egg, your retirement, and you put it all in a couple of funds or stocks or whatever, And you say, oh, well, the probability of any one of them blowing up is really low, and the probability of all three of my, funds blowing up is really low. And it's all like, then they all blow up, and you go, wait a minute, the probability was so low. But you can't. That's not the right way to function in life. You have to kind of consider the possibility and mitigate your risk if the outcome is really drastic, right? And so you can probably explain it better than I can about how if you think that instability is a potential in your own life, then you start trying to mitigate the risks, right? And that's part of why we're trying to educate ourselves or learn as much as we can about the time we live in and these dynamics, because then that knowledge allows us to mitigate the risks in our own lives.
Yeah. It's the instability thing. I bet FedEx probably has a decent amount of controls on making sure like that shit doesn't fall out of their cargo planes, but it's probably not the end of right. I think cargo ships all the time lose the shipping containers. That happens all the time, right? There's a excuse me. There's a book I think called Moby Duck. It actually kind of sucked. I thought it was going to be great, but it's about this shipping container of rubber ducks that fell off of a boat in like 1990, and they actually tracked the ducks as they washed up on different shores over the next couple decades, and they mapped out different trends in climate they had no idea existed. They found like new ocean currents and things, and then there's almost like geologic dating. Some of them were pristine, others were like the yellow paint was worn off and stuff. But that has nothing to do with what I was going to talk about. Is that you lose cargo, right? But then there's I think it's called the always never rule, and it's the shipment of nuclear weapons. They have to never fail. But I think it's always never never. They have to always work. You gotta if you're at a point where you're launching a nuke, it better work. If we're at a point in 2023 where we're launching a nuke, that thing better work. You don't want to shoot at the king and then it be a blank, right? If you're shooting, excuse me, I have the flu, you want it to be a death shot. But because these are so powerful, for every other given day, I mean, it's been 78 years since we dropped an A-bomb. You don't want them to ever go off. We transport them all around the world. I think we have like 810 military bases around the world. We have nuclear tipped cruise missiles everywhere. You can't have those going off by accident. And if you do drop one, I think Greensboro, North Carolina is where we lost a hydrogen bomb in the 60s, like 1,000 times stronger than the one in Hiroshima. It's still sitting in a swamp somewhere. It just never went off. If the risk is so bad, you really do have to mitigate it to be zero. Unlike if you lose a bunch of rubber duckies and it's like, well, okay, like the bottom line is going to be a little lower and maybe future trust in our shipping business is going to be somewhat damaged because we might lose your rubber duckies. But that's not the same when you're delivering hydrogen bombs and the flight path goes over Manhattan. So there is something to be said for like, you do need to make sure it's the instability. If it's that great, it's zero. On another tangent, one idea I've kind of been toying around with, and I haven't coalesced it yet. It hasn't condensed. So I don't have it as clear and well packaged as I'd like. Excuse me. Is when you look back to, I think, almost like the invention of language, oral tradition, passing down wisdom. Excuse me. I've been sick for a couple days, and normally I wouldn't give a shit, but I am in front of a highly sensitive microphone, and I don't want to be like clearing, sounding like some alien digesting. When you look at animals that don't speak, they repeat the same things every generation. That could also be a limit on their intellectual capacity, but you don't see inventions or cultural changes shifting down from generations of cows, right? Even very intelligent, the most intelligent ape they're still doing the same thing every generation forever, right? Some might start to enter a sort of stone age like we did, and through mimicry, you okay, if I pick up a rock, I can break open this turtle and get the nutrients or whatever. Then you have oral tradition, where you can pass down knowledge. And it's like that quote, be sure to read books so that you can come across easily knowledge that others gained through hardship. That's why I read so much, is to get the spoiler alerts to life's problems. And then as it goes from spoken language to written language, that becomes even better, because now it doesn't matter if the person telling the story dies, it's written down. So now you start to compound on previous generations' advancements, the agricultural revolution, the invention of the wheel, simple tools like a fulcrum or a club, forces pressure divided by area, invent a hammer, you can break things open better now. And then we're still on that linear path of passing down. It doesn't look the same. We would say that we're far more advanced than cavemen with a stone wheel, but we're really still in that same paradigm of just standing on the shoulders of the people before us. We see it with just technology. The guys that invented the vacuum tube computers, they're all dead, right? The people that, the Wright brothers, they're long gone, but we're still building on, there are still new versions of 740s. I think the last 747 rolled off a plant only like 3 weeks ago. We're still fine honing things. Steve Jobs is gone, but I'm using the newest generation iMac. So we're still in that cycle of just standing on the shoulders of generations before us. We're passing down technological advancements. We're not repeating the same thing. The cow has the calf. Hey, eat the grass, drink the water, poop, and go sleep. They're not changing, right? But we are. But then there is this sort of limiting factor where we are still the stupid cows. When you look at civilizations, we still repeat all the same stupid stuff. We expand, our armies get too big, we get overstretched, we get ambitious, decadence and luxury takes over the homeland, the political leaders raid the treasury, it'll start to dip, and then like a new emperor stands up, kills all the corrupt elite, and it looks like it's going to save itself, and then it all collapses for good, and then a new empire rises. And we don't look at that. We think we're still advancing. Like I have glasses. I have an iPhone. I have bottled water. Like 100 years ago, you couldn't get any of this. And that is good. We are above the cows in that, but we are still stupid cattle when it comes to just 250 years, right? We're advancing forward, and we have new flight lines, new energy efficiency, and desalination of salt water. But we're still just the same stupid cows when it comes to, hey, there's a ton of wealth at home. No one's working hard anymore. There is no trials and tribulations. We're overextending the military. We're trying to take over the world. And in many ways, we're still as naive as every other empire. So that then brings me to a point. Will the next truly paradigm shifting moment in biological life, like written language or like the opposable thumb, will that come when an empire arises and it spends, even if you took like 10% of the Pentagon's budget and examined every empire before it, will that be a new level of empire where bubbles will be a thing of the past, where the fourth turning will be like an old relic? And I don't know if humans can do that, because we kind of have our own built-in limits. We don't really look past 100 years, because you're maybe going to get to like 80, and then you're pretty concerned about your kids, maybe your kids, but you're not that concerned about the empire. It's nice, right? I mean, I'm saying this ironically as I have the flag behind me, right? But I wonder if that's what it will be. will that be on the heels of human life extension, of biogerontology? Maybe once lifespan starts to hit 200, we'll see a paradigm shift. People will now you'll live through the Great Depression, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, 9/11, COVID, and you'll only be halfway through your life. And you'll start to note these things arising again. Or is this just the limit of what humans give a shit about? There's like 250 years, and then the rest is whatever. I know that was like a 10-minute rant, so sorry for that verbal assault, but I had to get that thought out.
No, it's a great thought. And of course, it opens up like near infinite, tunnels that we could follow.
Yeah.
But like we have to mention Isaac Asimov's, Foundation trilogy, just as a kind of a classic of science fiction. And many other people have, pursued the same idea. Is there a deeper pattern that, as you say, we're going to move beyond, and when you describe all those dynamics, I think you're right about there being limits in human conduct or whatever. And I think it sort of combines sociology and anthropology with, psychiatry or psychology, right? Because humans are both a herd animal, right? I mean, we're very much a tribal animal, but we're also isolated. We're solitary animals. So we're kind of like an orangutan in the sense of we're fine being alone, and we actually need to be alone to some degree. We're solitary in terms of our primary interests, but then we're also participants in this hierarchical tribal competition, and we also run in herds. The madness of crowds and things like that. So obviously we have multiple layers of influence within each human, and so this works. This has worked in terms of selecting us to survive as a species. But the limitation is pretty obvious, because while the key to our success, I think, is cooperation. In other words, you identified the passing on of knowledge, absolutely key. But if we were all just isolated, solitary individuals, we would never be able to make use of this knowledge, right? So our cooperative skill sets are really what separates us, as well as the opposable thumb and some other good things. But so we succeed because of our cooperative efforts, but we're still driven by self-interest, right? Like, we're all for helping the group, but if I could just advance myself a little bit above everybody else, that would be even better, right? Because we're competing for mates, we're competing for resources, we're competing for power, because we're just like a huge tribe of chimpanzees, right? That there's this hierarchical battle for with payoff, and then bad things happen to us, right? When we fall to the bottom, we're often abused. We don't get to marry. We're hungry because somebody else took all the good stuff. So that competition is like driven by self-interest, and yet we also have this benefit from cooperating, right? So that tension is part of what I think we're discussing, is that it's built into human nature, and it's built in because we're under multiple pressures. As an individual, we're born in a tribe, and we're going to try to do our best to compete for resources and mates and stuff like that, because that's our genetic heritage. But we're also going to benefit from cooperating and expanding that cooperation. So, the great leaders, in humankind, that we often look at, warriors and so on, but, the really great leaders expanded the empire by trade and co-opting people's own self-interests, right? And the Romans were brilliant at this. They would, go in and kick a little butt and, conquer some territory, but they would leave it to the ruling elites of that thing and say, look, as long as you guys pay us tribute, everything's fine. And you're going to benefit because we have this massive trading empire. So you're going to get access to a bunch of great stuff and at lower prices, because you're part of the empire. And we're going to, we're going to station soldiers in your area and build a lot of great stuff, and we're going to be paying them with gold, and so that money's going to flow into your economy. So it's like self-interest is at the heart of all empires. And there are guys writing like Homer Dixon and other writers who say that's why societies or civilizations fall, is the average person looks at the hierarchy and structure, the ruling element, and they go, I don't think this is really serving me anymore. I mean, the
Yeah.
sacrifices I'm making to support this thing are not worth it. So then people just drop out
Yeah. That's a
because
good
it
point.
doesn't suit their self-interest anymore. And so that's a kind of like an interesting limit, that as you say.
Yeah. The self-interest will grow it is a weird thing. It's like the less you try to control the empire, the more it grows, the more wildly successful it is. And then the second you start trying to like put a name on it and make everyone fall in line as it rips itself apart. There's a quote, I think, and it's an airplane is 10,000 parts working together. A helicopter is 10,000 parts trying to get away from each other. And I don't know if that applies, but it does make me think of that. Um and then you got to think of like cycles of even bigger cycles. Is we're looking at the 80-year cycle, who came before you. Like, your parents, you probably know your grandparents, you'll probably know your kids, and you'll probably know your grandkids. That's pretty much like best case scenario in terms of seeing before and after you, right? Obviously, there are some anomalies. And then we're bringing up quote unquote bigger themes, of the empire. It lasts for 200, 300 years. But once you start to get to that point, let's say human life extended to 250 years, and we would probably get a pretty good grasp on the rise and fall of empires, and maybe even edit our behavior to not fall victim to the themes that bring down empires. Is there just another bigger theme from that? Or we figured it all out and it's like, great, now you've discovered the ice age, like the ice age cycles. You're like, wait, what? Oh yeah, no, there's an even bigger one outside of that. And then you zoom out even farther than that, and it's then there's the asteroid cycle. And you're like, holy, hold on. And then it just seems to be cycles and cycles and cycles. And is there much to do with that? What do you do with that? Are you ultimately on the path to become an eternal empire that survives not only economic cycles but also ice ages and sea levels and ocean acidity and asteroids? Like, to what end? Is it directly correlated to simply how long you're alive? I don't know about you, but I don't care that the Andromeda Galaxy is on course to collide with us, because I don't think it's going to happen for, I think, another 2 billion years or something, or 2 million. I don't give a shit. I'm It's 2023. I was born in 1990. Best case, I'm concerned with up to 2090. Best case. And I hope to be heavily medicated by then. I don't care about what China's doing in 2300. I just don't. It means nothing to me. So, but there is an interesting thing, and it's I think of Ray Kurzweil's technological singularity, how things accelerate, and as you said, 1,000 years ago, there are the same realities. Like, you grow up learning how to use a sword and a plowshare, just like your pops did, and just like your pops did, and you'll teach and there's something nice about it. You grow up, you find the woman, and you have the kids, and you learn how to hunt, and there's something comforting and almost Lord of the Rings Shire-ishness about it. It's all well and good. And now there's the blistering pace of acceleration, where my upbringing, although similar to my grandparents in some cases, you go to church on Sunday, you go to school, you learn how to drive. In many ways, it's not. They never had a personal phone. Even in my life, I've gone from the flip phone to the iPhone to the whatever. When that starts to really, really accelerate, I mean, we're going fast now, but when this picks up, I think that almost like the shockwave coming off of a plane, I have a feeling that our culture is emanating from our technology, like meme culture. That comes from TikToks and Vines and 10-second Snapchats, and memes come from using Uber or Facebook likes. Our society, it seems like our culture is almost like flames coming off of a burning log. It emanates from the technology. There is a culture around plowshares and swords. But when those things no longer exist anymore, we don't have the medieval knight and the chivalry. Now it's something else. So as technology starts to accelerate more and more, is there a secondary effect from it? Will we also have a cultural singularity where more and more wild things happen faster and faster and faster? I mean, from 2016 till now feels like an eternity. From Donald Trump being elected to COVID to wherever the hell we are now. It seems like life is getting more and more dramatic and fascinating. Are we speeding up to where maybe you don't need to live for 250 years to witness a long cycle? Maybe the cycles are compressing because they emanate from technology and our use of technology. And as the technology increases faster and faster, the shock waves reverberating from it are refreshing themselves faster and faster and faster. I don't really know, and I don't know if you have an answer. I don't know why I'm just throwing that on your shoulders, but
No, I think it is absolutely true. And that technology has a kind of a mind of its own, right? Like, no, we're not like some kind of, there's no class of technocrats going, well, we're going to slow the advance of technology, or, we're going to, no, it just has a life of its own, right? And you mentioned, for me, one of the great examples is eyewear. You held up your glasses. Well, nobody had glasses before like 1400, when the Venetians discovered not only lens, but how to grind lenses in bulk, mass produce. The Chinese had lens technology, but it was like a lot of things that China invented, it was left fallow. It wasn't developed. So then as eyewear spread around the world very quickly, because it was just so beneficial. Hey, I can't read anymore. I'm like nearly blind. And then I put on this new device and it's like, oh my God, I can see again. How fantastic. So when technology works, it spreads really quick, with unintended consequences. Like something I read recently struck me. You mentioned the iPhone, the smartphone as a generality. Well, the Chinese social credit system, where they can just cut you off at the knees via your phone. Like you can no longer take money out of your bank. You can't buy a ticket on a train anymore, et cetera, et cetera. It's all because of smartphones. If you didn't have a smartphone, you could not exert that level of surveillance state. So it's it's just funny how it develops, and we have all these high hopes for things like the CRISPR technology, right? Gene editing. And apparently I just saw as an example, there's a development of a cancer vaccine, which is sort of the holy grail for cancer treatments. And apparently there is one that's worked on glioblastoma, a kind of brain tumor, at least in mice. And so you go, wow, CRISPR is fantastic. But of course, you can use that same technology to make bioweapons that just kill us within moments, right? And so, and it's hard to control technology. But I want to bring up another kind of thing in this whole topic, which is we as humans, we seem to function best, as we're kind of talking about, when there's a bit of competition, There's some transparency, like everybody's getting, kind of has the same information. And there's opportunity to cooperate, like we're sharing knowledge. And so these kinds of traits are what underpin like an innovative culture that can adapt to whatever is thrown at it. Like you said, okay, new ice age, hey, but if you lose those characteristics in your culture, those are cultural advances, as you rightly pointed out. Could there be a cultural singularity? And I think we could argue that there are points in time when transparency, competition, cooperation, availability of energy and capital, so you can have the money and energy to pursue a good idea. When you get these bursts of things where those things are kind of the prevalent cultural characteristics, you get a renaissance. And then when those go away and people get rid of transparency, like we're going to hide everything from everybody because we don't want you to know how we're rigging the system, or how, we're benefiting ourselves. And then there's restrictions on information and new ideas, and dissent is crushed, new ideas. No, we don't want any. Then you get a decay and collapse. And so to your idea, which I find fascinating, I think the cultural singularity would be something like an AI, like a classic science fiction idea, where the big computer limits humanity's, destruction of dissent, transparency, sharing of knowledge, and cooperation. Right. In other words, it enforces these good cultural traits and make sure that no ruling elite suppresses them or destroys them. That would be a cultural singularity. But who controls the controller? And it's always
it is kind of funny how we have these grandiose ideas of what will this bring about, and it's not just that like there's a bad possibility. That seems to be the rule. We discovered how to split the atom, and it's like, oh God.
Yeah.
Like a little bit. We were like, we're gonna have atoms for peace. And it was like, yeah, we're also gonna make sure we put these on the nose cones of missiles so we can wipe out those other people. And it's so quickly. I mean, so 14 years, I think, after the Wright brothers flew, they're like, oh, we can fly. I think the first thing was like, we're gonna be able to deliver mail to distant peoples. Within 14 years, we were using them to over the trenches of World War I. And hey, shoot artillery there, and it's like we use it to kill each other so fast, so incredibly fast. I mean, how old's Twitter? And we're already having the scandals about, so the White House had back end portals and was using the FBI to strong arm. It's like we barely got 2 decades. We barely got into it. So there is that. I don't know. But then what's that conclusion? So don't advance at all? And well, that's not a good case either. But all of it stems from, I was thinking, why is Elon Musk kind of going balls out, right? He's definitely got FU money, sure. He's achieving everything it seems that he wanted to. Tesla, SpaceX, pretty much made it routine that rockets now land. That's gone from a novelty to normal in just 7 years, 8 years. And I was thinking, like, I wonder if we will look back and be like, oh, now in 20 years, we'll find out, oh, he successfully made a backup of his consciousness or something. This is out there, but just hear it out. He's kind of acting in a way that you just don't care. I mean, he's spitting in the face of, he's releasing Twitter files on the White House. I mean, that is the modern day King's Castle, like it or not. I mean, the White House, the strongest office of the strongest military on the planet. It is the top of the top, obviously for now, but it is. He's spitting right in the face of them. 300 billion doesn't mean anything. You're in the White House. I mean, you're in charge of the Pentagon, 17 intelligence agencies, a multi-trillion-dollar defense machine. He's kind of going out there and thumbing his nose at the most powerful people on the planet. Why is he doing that? I don't think he has terminal cancer. I don't think he has a death wish. I was like, well, how else would you be acting? You'd be acting in a way that, like, I love playing Grand Theft Auto 5. It's a great game. The way you start acting after you've entered the invincibility cheat is completely unrecognizable from if you're just playing normally. You're taking cover. If you're in a car, you make sure not to ram into a cop car. You don't go near the military base because they'll kill you. The second you enter in invincibility and nothing matters anymore, you just walk into a police station with a shotgun and go wild. You can just fly a plane right into the military base. They have tanks. What do you care? You're invincible. Doesn't matter. They can shoot you, light you on fire. It completely changes how you play the game. So what would you do if you successfully backed yourself up? You just had a copy. You had all the money in the world. Would you not just kind of start messing with your bully? See what their response is. But that's not the point I'm trying to make. Is what that really indicates then is all of our actions of self-preservation, cooperation versus backstabbing. It's all based on our own mortality. What if you removed mortality? Okay, so are we talking about biological longevity? Well, no, there's probably a simpler way to get to it. And it's just machine life. We don't need to perfect the human genome and ribosome proton pump decay. And no, forget all of that. Just build a silicon machine that doesn't die. Well, if you had an AI, and I'm not for or against it, just an observation, that wasn't threatened. It didn't need food or water. You couldn't bully it. It wasn't. It's not worried about the Gestapo threatening your family. How would you act? I always think that it's flawed that we assume the AI is going to wipe us out, which, again, back to your point about like CRISPR, because that's what we do. Anytime in human history, someone with advanced technology, you roll up on Indians and you've got metal armor, you're like, all right, well, we're just going to kill you. Every time in history, if we show up in boats with cannons and you see people in loincloths, it's just have at it. We're evil, right? So it is kind of funny. The first thing we assume that will happen when either AI appears or a UFO appears is we go, oh, they're going to slaughter us because that's what we do. But why would the AI have to slaughter us? I think that the idea that AI was, and I know this rant is all over the place, but I think that the idea that AI would slaughter us is so self-important. Oh, they're going to take us out because we're a threat. It might look at us the same way we look at a dirty counter. You just Clorox it and wipe it. Well, you killed it. All right, well, maybe just don't touch the counter. Just throw a mat over it. An AI might be so advanced that it sees no need to wipe us out. It has no intention to fix our society. It might just go along its life like an elephant ignores ants. Or it might look at our society and, like you said, almost act like a referee. Make sure no one destroys or dominates others. Or it might just not care at all. And then it ultimately comes back to, well, then who codes it? Who gets to control it? That might be the last decision humanity ever makes, is what character traits do you want in the AI?
Yeah, you mentioned, I think, in a previous podcast, one of your favorite novels, which was based on this exact idea of a AI that operated on Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. And there's lots of other science fiction stories about this same topic. And I myself have an idea for a science fiction story in which the AI arrives from UFOs, right? Intergalactic or whatever, shows up, and it keeps us around because we are the entertainment channel Like
Curiosity.
those bizarre humans are at it again. Look at those fools. And then it would be like we're just like the entertainment for for AI,
That
because we're just always doing such wild and crazy stuff.
that might not be a bad life though.
No, it would be great. And then we'd be amusing the super intelligence, which could mimic us, but it's kind of like chat AI. It mimics all kinds of writing, but is it going to necessarily, come up with the next War and Peace or Bukowski or whatever? I don't know. So anyways, it's always easy to mimic. And so we might still have this little magic part of us that we come up with new stuff
So
that's entertaining, if nothing else.
best case scenario, we want to be somebody's puppy or cat.
Precisely.
I mean,
Yeah.
look at you can look at a dog and be like, oh, it lives in your house, it doesn't get to go be an animal. I'm sure on some level there's some super alpha house pets that want to go out and be a wolf. I think the vast majority of them are very content with the food, the water, the sunny spot on the couch, the cold tile floor. And then we just fawn over them. And they get to just be dogs and cats. And the vast majority of like social media, we've created this interconnected global brain of information traveling at light speed. And a decent proportion of it is just pictures of cats. Like, right? It's cats, porn, and money. Sometimes some scientific breakthroughs, right? But
And
maybe
puppies.
yeah, right. A very small fraction of it is reading an abstract about some new research paper. The majority of it is bikinis and puppies, right? Is that a bad life? Aliens come along. They give you 3 square meals a day, no responsibility. You got to wear a collar, but you just get to be this cute thing. I don't know if that's a bad existence. Like some part of me deep down is like, oh, that's like a pathetic end to the human experiment. Another part of me is like, it doesn't sound that bad. I don't know.
Well, there'd always be a rebellion. And of course, the super intelligence would actually foster that, because just to keep things interesting. And then the
Would it
puppies
be like dog fighting? Would it
yeah,
be
kind of.
looked down upon? Would other AI step in and be like, be like Mike Vick with the dog fighting or something? They'd be like, this is immoral. You're pitting humans against one another.
And then the average human that's living the easy life would be offended and like, hey, don't you guys overthrow the super intelligence? My gosh, you'd be ruining everything, So yeah, and then that would be vastly entertaining, right?
Yeah. And then they would start to breed us, right?
That's easy to do.
Yeah. Well, you'd want purebred humans. The AI would be so racist in our eyes. Because we look at it like, oh, I want a pure black lab. I want an original toy poodle. They'd be like, I want a blue-eyed, white-skinned Norwegian. Like we'd be like, that's racist. But they look at it as just like, no, they'd celebrate the differences.
Could be, or and then the mongrels tend to outcompete those. So you got to keep the mongrels, the mix up, the mixed genetic heritage. Well, I know we've run on along. I have to insert one idea here,
Yeah, we can keep chatting.
or you can always you can break it into a couple of sections if people get
No, never cede power to the audience. Never cede power to never cede power to the crowd. You have to control them or they will control you. They are a beastly, wild bunch of primitive cattle. You have to tell them what they're receiving, or they will the inmates will run the asylum. You have to if you start to cede, we shouldn't talk about this, the crazies will come out of the cracks and start dictating that the podcast goes their way. You have to be very disciplined with them. You have to use the bullwhip and keep them in line.
Well, thank God you've got that role and the bullwhip. Yeah, there's some this whole idea of, we're advancing at a rapid pace, right? At an accelerated pace. Well, culturally, there's a lot of evidence for that. In other words, it's like the knowledge that we're piling up, then that is evolutionary in its own. In other words, it's on a different track than our genetic advancement and our epigenetic, right? Because we have two ways to pass on beneficial, variants, right? The epigenetics is much faster. Like a mother can pass on epigenetic benefits to the child, and where messing with the genetic material takes generations. So our cultural advancements are even faster. So this idea that we could advance to the point where we're not going to repeat the mistakes that bring down civilizations, it's possible, I think, in a relatively short period of time, because the timeline of our cultural advancement lags the technology that we're talking about, but it has a potential to speed up, kind of catch up. And we could, in fact, have a cultural singularity where we say, let's do the things that keep the Renaissance going. And we just limit the things that destroy, those periods of rapid growth and innovation, and spreading of equality through ideas that produce more benefits for the entire human populace, right? As opposed to just benefiting, a few people at the top. So, I mean, why couldn't that happen?
Can you separate them though? It's you can't have up without down. I don't think you can keep a renaissance going without having horribly destructive periods in between. Right? I mean,
that may be true. And then you engineer those to be not so bad.
Then your renaissance won't be as great.
Well, that could very well be. Yeah.
I actually have like my own running theory based on nothing, but I like it. And it's about that sort of engineering. And there's some, I don't know who released it, or DARPA, I don't know, or just some idiot on Reddit. But it's basically like without the Cold War, in 2020, we would have been at the year 2000 technologically, right? We would have had the first iPod in 2020. Instead, we got it 20 years prior. And that came because of the pace of advancement during the Cold War, which was based on fear and wanting to kill the other guy. It's a tightrope that can accelerate technological advancement. Incentive works well. Fear of death works even better. But there's a fine line, right? Because in a Cold War, if you mess up, it's not, oh, well, somebody got invaded. The earth is an irradiated ember. It's the end. But if you can keep it from going nuclear in 24 years, 1945 to 1969, you can go from prop-driven fighter planes to walking on the moon. You can get going pretty fast. The trade-off is if you mess up, it's much like walking on a tightrope between skyscrapers. It's much more exhilarating than walking over a pool. The downside is if you fall, you're dead. I was thinking that if there are technocratic controllers guiding human civilization, or even if it's AI, they might be trying to needle us into another Cold War to jack up the rate of acceleration. They might be looking at the difference between 1991 and now, being like, man, it's really slowed down since the Cold War. You don't have that same oomph when you're fighting the Taliban, right? You want a near peer competitor. You want nuclear parity. You want to be worried that the Soviets are going to nuke you from the moon. If you're at the driver's seat of human civilization, it might be in your interest to push the world into another Cold War and get 200 years of advancement in 40 years, especially if you have a limited amount of time on this world and you want to see technology increase enough to accelerate your own longevity. You might want CRISPR technology to increase 1,000-fold so that you can live longer. But you're not going to get it from the free market. You might only get it if China and America are at each other's throats for half a century. They might be engineering that. If I'm just remove yourself from it and look at if you wanted technology to accelerate faster, or better yet, if there's an AI that wanted technology to accelerate faster, because that's increasing its own fertile ground to become more powerful. And if you were planning on getting rid of humans anyway, just look at it like game theory. It might be thinking, okay, I'm going to kill all 8 billion humans. They're a nuisance. I just want to, I think what Kurzweil calls it is bootstrapping. I'm going to design, if I'm an AI, I'm going to design a smarter AI so that AI can design a smarter AI, and we can do it at ever faster or ever smaller periods of time. If you're going to get rid of humans anyway, you might also look at it. If you're an AI that's smarter than a single human, but maybe not smarter than every human combined, if you're a capitalist AI, you'd be like, wait, we can still get something out of this. There's 8 billion humans with somewhat operating biological computers in their heads. Instead of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, why don't I see what innovation they can come up with when they're backed against the wall? You might pit them at each other and try to squeeze the last little bit of innovation out of them before you wipe them out. Or it might just be entertainment. They might just go, dude, the Cold War was the best season of humans yet. It was so much better. I don't know, but it seems like that's when we, kind of what you said at the beginning of this podcast, is that's when we create our best. Do it better, faster, cheaper, more resilience. Is when
adversity. Yeah.
Is when you're up against imminent annihilation. I don't know. The Cold War might have been that might be what they want, is when every human is under the threat of constant death, which is a horrifying reality. I don't really know where I'm going with this, but
well, I think that's a great idea. And so let's take it and say let's say the AI invents evidence of UFOs, right? That can be verified by anybody. And it's like, and they are out to kill us. So so that would be ideal, is to create an interplanetary threat that would be really hard to overcome.
Yeah. I mean, that was Reagan's whole thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I often wonder like how humanity would come together in the face of an alien invasion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Well, I also have to bring up Leonardo da Vinci at this point, and Machiavelli. They were both in the Italian Renaissance, right? They knew each other. Machiavelli was younger, but he traveled with Leonardo, and Leonardo was basically selling his art and his ideas and stuff. That was his living between these warring city-states, and so or competing, not necessarily. They occasionally had combat, but mostly it was just jostling for competitive advantage, right? In trade and arts and prestige, this kind of stuff, which, humans love all that stuff, status, prestige. I mean, part of the whole, as you say, the Apollo program was really about prestige. We're going to beat you to the moon, and that means we're superior. We didn't have to, destroy anything. We were gaining prestige, right? So we could have a smaller scale of what you're describing. We could go back to a period of warring city-states and get the same result, because that the competition is localized, but still, to the person like Leonardo and Machiavelli, who are going between these things, trying to get the best deal for themselves, it doesn't matter whether it's a global empire that's competing or, some city that 20 miles away, so. I'm just pointing out there's another model to get the
Yeah.
same result that you describe. And I think, and really, why did the Renaissance occur in southern France and Italy? Why did it get going so fast and create such accomplishments? And you can say, well, there's two things. One is all those city states were jostling for power and competing with each other. And there was this ferment, and then they rediscovered all this great stuff that the Greeks and Romans had invented and built, and they discovered the texts, and they got translated into the modern languages. And it was all like, it was kind of like, just for them, it was like finding the plans the aliens used to build like intergalactic travel.
Yeah, I think Terrence McKenna, he talked about it. He called it the archaic revival.
Yeah.
He was like a bunch of what did he say? Excuse me. He goes, 500 years ago, a bunch of Italian investment bankers looked at the world, decided they didn't like the way it was going. And so they went 2,000 years into the past until they found a model that they could hang their hat on. It didn't arise. Like the blueprints were there. Yeah. The UFO blueprint was, it's buried in the sand. And we found, we find the blueprints. It'd be like finding the Rosetta Stone, but it has, the instructions for how to make a cold fusion reactor. But then you got to think, in between when those first ideas first arose, when the UFO blueprints were created and buried, there was a long time where they weren't considered by virtue of the fact that they weren't implemented. So there was a long time where people thought things were going one way, and then it was all just completely thrown out the window. The entire research paper was just crumbled up and thrown in the fire. Forget all of your typos and all of your notes and all of your, the whole thing's, we're doing something else. Like, and then they just reached back in time and hung their hat on the Renaissance, or on those old models, which became the Renaissance. So it's kind of funny to think about now. Is like, we might be leading up to some moment where in 2300 they reach back into whatever time and use some old model, and there's another Renaissance, which is kind of hilarious, because then it means everything we're doing right now is utterly meaningless. It is all of our ideas and philosophies of capitalism and social welfare and a military state and it could all be nothing. It could be the homework that's just thrown in the fire. That's not funny. Like, of all these grandiose, hey, no, it's all, screw it, just forget it all. So we're not going to keep doing this feudal warlord and castles and no. We're gonna do this idea of democracy. We found these old blueprints 2,000 years ago. Drop everything. We're doing something else now. And it's like, oh, like that is kind of funny.
It is, and yet it happened exactly like we're talking. That's exactly what happened.
And why did it happen? Because they didn't like the way the world was going. I don't think a whole lot of people are particularly thrilled with our current planetary position.
Yeah.
I think this could all be thrown out the window. Which, there's some like Zen ego annihilation there, to realize that everything you're working towards could truly just be just throw it out. It means nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. We could basically, we're talking about like the guy that supposedly followed the Roman emperor when he came back to go through Rome with a parade for all the heathens he conquered. And the guy is like, hey, you're not so great, pal. And so that hubris, I think you're right. It is funny if our hubris is so vast, and yet it's not really recognized. We really think, we're the most advanced civilization and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But as you say, is it really benefiting most of humanity? Would everybody say, oh no, let's keep what we have, it's so wonderful? Or would they go, hey man, I'm ready for a new system? Yeah, you can keep your feudal lords and all that stuff. I'm ready for something else.
Do you think any any of this has is tied into ever increasing, I guess, respectable UFO sightings? I love UFOs. I love everything about UFO culture. But it is moving from like the crazy guy talking about the flying saucers to like, the Navy, the Pentagon releasing like FLIR camera footage of objects, setting up,
Mhm.
UAPs and ATIP and OSAP and whatever the hell they're doing. I wonder what that is. Is it actual alien contact? Is it our own technology? Is the whole thing a psyop? Whatever it is, it's like it's a fascinating variable that's being inserted into this system of systems.
Absolutely. That's the minimum description
It's
of
the
it.
bare minimum description. It's like saying what happened on 9/11. A whole lot. Like, yeah, it's I think as Brian Reagan said, uh uh one thing led to another. He goes, that's the laziest writing ever. One thing led to another. He's like, it's fine in anything else, but if you ever read in a history book, one thing led to another. He goes, no, your job is to describe what things led to what things. You know, think what if somebody asked you how World War II, what happened in the early 20th century? Well, a disgruntled World War I veteran applied to art school. One thing led to another, and we dropped 2 atomic bombs on the sovereign nation of Japan. It's like, no. There is something in between. Are we inserting some new variable into the guiding of human evolution? Like, why is it UFO? It almost seems to be the Deus ex machina. Once you introduce UFOs and alien technology, it's almost a way to like money laundering. You're sort of opening this possibility for a new era of human civilization. You can, it's a blank check. You almost don't have to imagine it. Like right now, if you said, well, how are we going to increase the wealth of every person on earth? You say, well, we're trying to make breakthroughs with fusion, and they're still using X number of kilowatts of power per person and vertical farms, but you can only get so far. Versus, it's almost cheap writing. You go, well, you're not considering the fact that in 2023 is when they started reverse engineering the UFO. That just opens the Pandora's box to if you said on January 6th, 2023, the Pentagon came out and said, here's the UFO, we're now working with every government on the earth to reverse engineer it because it's accessing some sub-quantum energy. All of your prior predictions for what 2023 and the rest of the decade was going to look like goes completely out the window. You're now thinking of anything and everything. Elon Musk wanting to go to Mars is now seen as not thinking big enough, right? I mean, like if you go back and look to like 1950s and 1960s sci-fi writing, you wonder like where did that imagination come from? And it's because it went from World War II ending with the splitting of the A bomb or the splitting of the atom. Anything seems possible. Versus now we're very timid in our imagination. It's, well, is there going to be enough food? Are the supply lines going to last? What if there's another pandemic? Maybe we need that next big thing to open the possibilities of, well, what's next? I don't know what that would be. And again, I don't really know where I'm going with this rant, but I don't know.
Well, I am older than you, and
Nonsense.
I hope that the UFO mystery, whatever the source is revealed in my lifetime, because I really want to know. I've been watching this stuff, for decades, and so it's like, whatever as you say, whether it's a psyops, or whether it's some Earth technology, or it is in fact, extraterrestrial. Be great to know. And it would be, and I just love the way that you've encapsulated our whole discussion, in my view, into something arises which is unexpected, which changes the whole direction of human endeavor and history. And that kind of stuff happens all the time. And we've been basically discussing various examples of that. And so it's like, well, yeah, we really need that. We do, because I think we're running out of rope here on the model that we've been using. And so let's hope it has a source. And if it's humanity, that's great. If it's extraterrestrials, hey, that's even more interesting. And I'm if nothing else, I hope we entertain them. And that may be why they've been monitoring us, that somebody's making a ton of money back on, I'm thinking of what's the nearest Alpha Centauri or whatever.
Yeah.
And because the human channel is just kicking butt, and it's like the most entertaining stuff out there is what's happening on Earth.
What would be terrifying is if they got here and they thought we were the advanced civilization. They were like, we have put we have a global cooperative effort to build this ship to reach you guys 4 light years away. You have all the answers. And we're looking at them going, oh, fuck. We thought y'all were oh no, man. Because right, we always expect if the alien, they'll either kill us or they'll give us god tier technology. How terrifying would it be if they showed up? Like the one surviving warrior of a battle, and they're like, have you guys figured out fusion? And we're like, oh no. No, man, they're actually burning firewood in France right now. Like, we thought y'all, oh no. No, not at all, man. That might be it.
Yeah, that could be it. And their ship is rusty.
Oh yeah.
And there's some duct tape or equivalent, kind of holding their propulsion system.
They come to us and they're like, advanced life finally, and we're like, no, man, no, not at all.
Yeah,
that I don't know.
That would be great, because they'd say, look, we've been monitoring all your puppies and kittens stuff. You guys have to just have it totally together to be blowing that much resources on puppies and kittens.
I mean, if you guys use such a proportion of your global internet brain on pornography, surely you've mastered surely the rest of your house is in order. We're like, don't, no, not actually. It's the exact opposite. It's because this system is so utterly, hopelessly destined for collapse. We escape into our phones every evening and look at cat memes. This is our opiate. It's not fentanyl, it's cat memes. Oh God.
Oh, well, I think I don't think we can top this for an ending. Yeah, honestly.
I think should we I think that's a natural capping.
Yeah, I think so.
Everything's over.
And I'm laughing so hard.
Well, hey man, that's a sign of a good ending, is if it ends with UFOs or laughing. I feel like that is the natural. But real quick, I do kind of want to go back to something you said, just as a good ending, is you said it well. We're running out of rope for this system. It can only go one of two directions. It either seems like a global reset, and not in some Davos, Klaus Schwab, but being nuclear holocaust or an asteroid, or God from the machine, AI. From a standpoint of a writer, if you're writing human history, you've written yourself into a corner. You don't know how you're getting out of this. you would have to use either the end of the world from an asteroid or from nuclear war, or a sort of a way to almost wash the sins of your problems. And that's God tier AI, because now you no longer need to think. You go, oh, it's just smarter than us. So of course we wouldn't come up with these solutions because it's smarter than us, or it's AI, or or it's a UFO. They're from somewhere else with better technology. The end. It's introducing a new character in the 9th season. It's like, wait, what? And it's like, yeah, no, it's the end of Saving Private Ryan, where he's like shooting the tank with the gun, and then for the first time in the movie, airplanes come and bombs the tank, and it's, where was that the last hour and a half? And it's, they're planes now, and it's like, oh, come on, it's such BS. Like, that's what it is we're running out of rope. And my imagination says that we're either going off the cliff, human-made nuclear war, or just natural asteroid, or some new heroic blank check appears that we can launder everything through. Oh, it's just God tier AI. The end. Or it's aliens, and they've given us the new tech. The end. And it just solves all the problems. I don't really. Aside from that, I don't really. Yeah, I think we're running out of rope. I don't know.
Or we uncover the Rosetta Stone. There's always that,
Well,
what's
yeah,
that thing in the sand? Yeah.
yeah. What is? Isn't that what? That's what Bob Lazar said, though, right? Do you follow Bob Lazar? You know, the UFO guy.
Oh,
He
no,
was
I
on
don't.
he was on Rogan. He's the guy that said he worked at Area 51. He did a whole podcast on Joe Rogan. But he said he claims to have worked on a UFO, and he's kind of like the most credible, whatever. He says that the US military has 9 UFOs in their possession. He doesn't know where they got them. It's all compartmentalized. But he said one of them came from an archaeological dig. Now, granted, this is all, you have to accept just the premise of that this guy's telling the truth, right? I mean, but he said one of them came from an archaeological dig, and it's ancient. That might be it. I don't know. I don't really care anymore. I gotta be honest. I think you have the right move. Like, just move to Hawaii. I've been thinking that during this podcast. I'm like, why am I trying to figure this shit out? Why don't I just move to Hawaii? That's I don't care what happens. Unplug, move to Hawaii. I think that's what the answer is. I think you figured it out. Terrence McKenna moved to Hawaii. Richard Alpert, Ram Dass, he moved to Hawaii. There are these philosophers that through psychedelic experience and meditation finally conclude that it's all meaningless. They all moved to Hawaii. I feel like that's the ending.
Yeah, and if it's kind of expensive here, so then you can, there's other places that are nice around the world that are also have, good weather and stuff like that. So yeah, there's opportunities out there.
Well, no, I think it all justifies itself. It's once you've understood none of it means anything, then neither do expenses, because money's fake. I think Hawaii is where you go when you've just boiled off normal philosophy. You're just like, no, screw it. It doesn't matter. Shut up. It's paradise. But how am I shut up? It's paradise. It's over. What am I doing? Trying to build a podcast and lose weight and save money. What am I doing? I shouldn't move to Hawaii. I'm moving in with you, Mr. Smith. Thank you for your invitation. I will happily accept it.
Yeah, it's a workshop down below with some tools and stuff, but we can,
I'm
we can make
talking
it
about.
work.
Yeah. Who cares? Just shut up. It's time. What are you gonna do at this? Shut up. I don't care. Just go out to Hawaii. Fuck do I care? What's gonna happen in Ukraine? I don't care. I'm done. Unplug it all. Move to Hawaii in a Faraday cage so you can't access the internet. That's happiness.
I think so.
All right, man. Well,
Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And I hope the audience is as entertained as us. I know we're not supposed to care about them, but
no,
anyways.
don't care about them. Never cede control. They are the beasts. The horses pull the chariot. You don't ask the horses what they want. You just keep whipping them. Just never cede control. As you can tell, there's truly no direction for better or worse to this podcast. It can start with the fourth turning and end with UFOs in Hawaii, but that's what I like about it. And I'd love to have you on again here. I'd love to have you on here again sometime. Maybe we'll do a little more of a structured discussion. But
Or maybe not, because this was terrific, right? I mean,
it's
who
so
could
much fun.
predict, right? I mean,
That's
yeah,
what I'm saying. It's so much fun. People are like,
yeah.
so what are your notes? What are your talking points for the podcast? And I'm like, I don't I don't know what the hell you're talking. I take the dice and just roll it. What podcast? I don't know. I hope the person has as good of a sense of humor as I do. That's really it. I hope I don't offend anybody. That's the worst is when someone's like, "Can you give me a series of talking points?" I'm like, "No, absolutely not." Yeah. Well, that was fun,
Okay,
man. Well, thank you so much for coming on here. Any links you want me to put in the description, social media, website, blog?
yeah, just of2minds.com. People
Okay.
can navigate there and fool around, find something.
All right. And just, I don't know, UFOs.
Yeah,
All right.
okay.
Thank you so much, man. Let's definitely do it again. I'll send you this episode when it's up. And thank you so much for your patience and sense of humor.
Oh, yeah, and I'll promote it because it's actually, there's a lot of great stuff in what we talked about, I mean, so, yeah, thank you so much, and I look forward to having another discussion.
Hell yeah, man. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weather as it is. It's let's see, it's 31 degrees and snowing here. So I'm more and more realizing what in God's name am I doing with my life? I need to be in a flower shirt out in Hawaii. That's enlightenment. All right, man.